There is a particular sound that Crystal makes when a man who has just signed his own destruction sets his wine glass down. Park Min-jun made that sound at 9:47 p.m. at table 14 of Hanyang. He did not look up. He did not need to. He had heard exactly what the man at table 7 had whispered to the black waitress standing 8 feet away. 6 syllables of Korean that the man believed no one in this Manhattan restaurant could understand. He was wrong about 2 people in the room. The waitress, Naomi Carter, had spent 18 months learning Korean for reasons that had nothing to do with him. The man at table 14 had spent 6 months ignoring the whisperer's emails for reasons that were about to become very public. Connor Whitfield did not notice the silence at table 14. He did not notice the senior captain stop breathing behind the wine station. He did not notice that the woman whose tip he was about to set at 0 kept her engagement ring on a thin gold chain inside her uniform shirt, against the skin above her heart. In 13 minutes, he would notice everything. Before we go any further, do me one favor. In the comments below, tell me your city and the time you're watching this. I want to see where in the world this story is finding you tonight. And if you have ever been a server, a hostess, or anyone who has stood politely while someone wealthier treated you like furniture, stay until the end. This story is for you. Subscribe. Ring the bell. Let's begin. Hanyang sat on the 31st floor of the Ashford Grand Hotel, 6 blocks east of Central Park, and the East River below it looked like spilled mercury at night. The restaurant did not advertise. It did not need to. Chef Lee Jin-ho had 2 Michelin stars, a 7-month reservation list, and a tasting menu that started at $310 per person before wine. The cocktails included a Negroni made with 6-year-aged ginseng. The butter on the bread service was churned that morning in a kitchen on the 29th floor and brought up by a private elevator. Every detail had been argued about. Every detail had won its argument. What the diners did not know was that the silent investor whose money had built the kitchen, and whose name appeared nowhere on the lease, was sitting at table 14 tonight with an espresso in front of him and a single fresh raspberry on the saucer, not on the cup. Min-jun always ordered it that way. Marcus Lin, the senior captain, had stopped asking after the 3rd visit. The first time Naomi had served Min-jun's table, 14 months ago before she knew his name, she had brought the raspberry on the cup like every other server. He had not corrected her. He had only smiled, moved the raspberry to the saucer himself, and said, "Thank you for the espresso. It is exactly what I needed." She had thought about that for 3 days. Then, she had asked Marcus who he was. Marcus had said, "He's the kind of man who waits 1.5 seconds after you finish a sentence before he answers. Watch him sometime. It's the most polite thing you will ever see anyone do." That had been the beginning of everything. Tonight, 14 months later, Naomi Carter was 26 years old, engaged for exactly 2 months, and standing in the services alley pinning a stray coil of hair back into the low bun the uniform required. Her mother had taught her how to do this bun in the kitchen of their house in Atlanta when Naomi was 11, the summer after Naomi had started serving plates at her grandmother's church suppers. Her grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor Carter, born 1932, died 2018, had cooked in white families' kitchens in Macon, Georgia for 31 years before her arthritis made the work impossible. The summer Naomi turned 9, she had stood next to her grandmother pouring milk into a pitcher and complaining that one of the guests had not said thank you. Her grandmother had set down the pitcher, looked at her, and said, "The way someone treats the person in bringing them their food tells you everything about who they are. Listen with your whole self, baby. Then decide who deserves to sit at your table." Naomi had remembered that sentence the way some children remember scripture. She had finished Cornell's School of Hotel Administration in 3.5 years on a full scholarship. Her parents, Audrey Carter, 4th grade teacher, Wendell Carter, high school history, had cried at her graduation in a way that embarrassed her at the time and made her cry herself at 24 when she finally understood it. She had been at Hanyang for 14 months. In 4 years and 7 months, she planned to open a 38-seat restaurant in Bedford-Stuyvesant. She had $61,400 saved toward it. Min-jun knew this and had been told gently but firmly that he was not allowed to help. He had said that night, "I would not insult you by offering." It was, she thought, the most romantic sentence anyone had ever said to her. At 8:14 p.m. on this particular Friday, the heavy bronze doors of Hanyang swung open, and Connor Whitfield walked in. He was 35, 6'1", and wore a suit that cost more than Marcus Linsland's monthly rent. His hair was the color of expensive sand. His teeth were the kind of white that has a dentist on retainer. He removed his cashmere overcoat, $4,800, Brioni, charcoal, and held it out behind him without turning, the way a man does when he has spent 12 years training himself never to consider whether someone is there to catch it. A junior hostess caught it. What Connor had not put on the resume that Whitfield Capital published, the resume that said Wharton, summa cum laude, MBA Harvard, was that he had grown up in a single-story house in Akron, Ohio, the son of an HVAC repairman named Daniel Whitfield. He had legally changed his middle name at 22 from Daniel to Ashford because Ashford sounded like money. He called his mother twice a year. He had not been home in 3. He was at Hanyang tonight for 2 reasons. The first was the woman on his arm, Brittany Hoult, 28, marketing director, engaged to him for exactly 2 months, and now looking around the dining room with the particular bright nervousness of a person realizing they are out of their depth. The second reason, Connor had not told her. The second reason was sitting at table 14 drinking an espresso. Connor demanded table 7, the corner banquette by the window, and got it because Henri Devereaux, the maitre d', had been instructed by Mr. Park 6 months ago to seat any future Whitfield Capital booking somewhere visible. Connor did not know this. He thought he had won. He was led past table 2, where federal judge Ethan Whitmore, a Hanyang regular for 8 years, looked up briefly from his wife and the lamb's shoulder and looked back down. He was led past table 9, where a small woman with a notebook and a half-drunk glass of natural wine watched him for exactly 3 seconds longer than was polite. Her name was Sophia Reyes. She was 41. She wrote about food for the New York Times. He did not notice any of them. He sat down. He scrolled his phone for 43 seconds. Then Naomi Carter walked up to the table with 2 menus held against her chest, and Connor Whitfield looked up. His eyes traveled from her face. Black, 26, no makeup but lipstick, to her name tag, to her hands, to the cheap-looking gold chain disappearing into the collar of her uniform shirt. The whole appraisal took 1 1/3 seconds. In that fraction of time, in the small private theater of his own head, he decided what kind of person she was. Naomi felt it land. She did not flinch. She had felt it land before, in 14 months at Hanyang, in 3.5 years at Cornell, in 26 years of being a black woman walking into rooms where people had already decided. The smile was real, because she had decided long ago that her smile belonged to her, not to him. "Good evening," she said. "My name is Naomi. I'll be taking care of you tonight." Connor Whitfield smiled back. He had built his career on reading rooms. Tonight, he had walked into the only room in Manhattan he could not read. 2 people in it were about to teach him why. The first cruelty was the wine list. Connor opened it, scanned for 41 seconds, and ordered a 2009 Romanée Conti at $6,800 a bottle without looking up. He did this loudly enough that the couple at table 6 turned briefly. He did this for the couple at table 6. Brittany Hoult, 28, said, "Connors, are you sure?" "It's a Friday," he said, in the tone people use to mean don't embarrass me. Naomi wrote it down. "An excellent choice, sir. I'll have our sommelier decant it tableside." "I don't need a performance," Connor said. "Just pour it, and do try not to handle the bottle like you're carrying a baby," she said. "Of course, sir." She walked back to the wine station. Marcus Lynn was already pulling the cradle down. "Table 7, Naomi said. "I heard," Marcus said. He did not look at her. He had been doing this for 22 years, and one of the things he had learned in year 4 was that when a server's pride was hurt, the worst thing you could do was acknowledge it before they were ready. He poured the Romanée Conti into the decanter himself, and then he did something he had not done in 6 months. He glanced over the top of the decanter toward table 14. Min Jun was not looking at them. Min Jun was looking at his espresso. But the espresso had not been touched since 8:11 p.m., and it was now 8:39, and Min Jun was a man who drank espresso in 3 sips, never 4. Marcus understood. He gave Naomi the decanter and said very quietly, "He knows." "I know he knows," Naomi said. "Tell him I have it." Marcus considered this for a half second, which was the longest he ever considered anything. Then he gave her the smallest possible nod and let her carry the wine back to table 7 herself. She poured Connor's glass. She poured Brittany's glass. She set the decanter on the silver coaster. That was when Connor switched languages. His Korean was not bad. He had studied it for 2 years at Wharton, hiring a private tutor named Mrs. Han to come to his apartment 3 evenings a week, because his consultants had told him that the next 20 years of hedge fund money were going to be made or lost in Seoul. He spoke the language the way men like him learned languages. Clean grammar, terrible humility. He turned to Brittany and said in Korean, "Don't worry about the bill. The waitress can barely add. She probably went to community college. Did you see the hair? They make them wear it like that to look educated." Brittany, whose Korean was 3 months of Duolingo, said, "Oh wait, what?" Connor laughed. "Nothing, baby. I was just admiring the wine." Naomi finished pouring. Her face did not move. In Korean, in her own head, she counted. That was the 3rd sentence. She walked back to the service station. She put down the tray. She turned her face toward the kitchen door. She walked, at a perfectly normal pace, through the swinging door into the back alley where the bus tubs were stacked, and she stood with her back against the wall and breathed in for 4 counts, held for 4, breathed out for 4. She did this 3 times. Marcus appeared in the doorway 6 feet away. He did not say anything. He waited. "Don't tell him," Naomi said. "He already knows. Then tell him not to do anything." "He won't," Marcus said. "He's waiting for you to ask." She nodded once. She put her hand against the cool stainless steel of the wall, the way her mother had once put a hand on her shoulder before her first piano recital. "You are ready, baby, you are ready." And then she walked back out onto the floor. Connor Whitfield was holding court. He had decided, somewhere around the second glass of Romane Conti, that tonight was a night for impressing Brittany with his fluency. He kept slipping into Korean for the cruel parts and back into English for the charming ones. Brittany, who could feel something was wrong but could not name it, laughed at all the English parts a half-beat too late. At 9:03 p.m., Connor ordered. Bulgogi en croûte flambée, he said. Off menu. I know it's off menu. Tell the chef I expect it tableside. The whole performance, Naomi wrote it down. 2 portions, sir. 1 for me. She'll have the diver scallop. Brittany, who had wanted to try the bulgogi, said nothing. Yes, sir, Naomi said. At 9:14 p.m., while she was at the pass conferring with Chef Lee about the flambé cart, Connor leaned toward Brittany again and said, in Korean, the sentence that Sophia Reyes, 3 tables away, eating her halibut, listening to everything, understanding nothing but the tone, would later describe in her article as the moment the evening turned. He said, you want to know why we're really here tonight? Park Min-jun ignored my last 17 emails. Tuesday, my proxies finish accumulating the second tranche. By the end of the month, I will own 31% of Daejin's North American logistics arm. He will have to take my call then. I came here tonight to be in the room where it begins. I wanted to taste it. He laughed. He drank his wine. He looked around the dining room of Hanyang the way a hunter looks at a forest he has decided to buy. 8 feet behind him at table 14, Park Min-jun set down his espresso for the second time that evening. He did not finish it. He had heard a man in his own father's language in his own restaurant, 8 feet from his fiancée, announce a hostile takeover. He started to stand. He stopped. He waited the 1.5 seconds he always waited. He looked at Naomi, who was walking back from the pass with a tray of mise en place for the flambé cart. He caught her eye for less than a second. She gave him, with the tilt of her chin, the smallest possible answer. Not yet. Let me. He sat back down. Across the dining room, Marcus Lynn exhaled. What Connor Whitfield had failed to understand, what he had never, in any of his 35 years, paused long enough to learn, was that Korean has a grammar of distance. There is a word for her. There is a word for that thing over there. He had been using the second word for Naomi all night. 23 times by 9:14 p.m., she had counted. Some men insult you with slurs. Some men insult you with grammar. The grammar is worse because you cannot prove it in court. She loaded the cart. She lit the burner. She wheeled it across the polished walnut floor toward table 7, where Connor Whitfield was laughing at his own joke, and the trap he had spent the evening building closed quietly around him in 3 languages at once. The flambé cart had been built in 1971 by a Lyonnais silversmith named Henri Vauclair, and Chef Lee had bought it at auction in Geneva in 2019 for $84,000. Naomi positioned the cart 28 inches from the edge of table 7. She knew the number because Chef Lee had drilled it into her. Too close and the heat reached the guest. Too far and you lost the theater. 28 inches was the sweet spot. She had practiced this dish 46 times in the prep kitchen on her days off, under Chef Lee's quiet supervision. The first 3 times she had broken the sauce. The 4th time she had cried. The 46th time, last Tuesday, Chef Lee had said, now, you do it for guests, and walked away. Tonight was the first night. She seared the short rib en croûte over the portable induction. She watched the surface, 174 degrees Celsius, 345 Fahrenheit exactly, and felt the air shift as Connor leaned forward to mock her with another sentence in Korean she was tired of hearing. She did not hear it. She had stopped hearing it sometime around the 3rd glass of wine. Not because she had numbed, because she had decided, somewhere between the service alley and the flambé cart, that whatever Connor Whitfield was saying belonged to him and the food belonged to her. She poured the soju into the pan. She tilted the pan. The fire climbed 14 inches into the air, blue at the base, gold at the tip, and the entire dining room of Hanyang stopped what it was doing for the 1.5 that the flame stood there. At table 9, Sophia Reyes set down her pen. At table 2, Federal Judge Whitmore's wife touched her husband's wrist without looking away from the flame. At table 14, Park Min-jun watched his fiancée's face in the light of a fire she had built with her own hand, and he thought of the night 7 months ago when he had come home at 1 in the morning and found her asleep on the couch with a culinary chemistry textbook open across her chest, a yellow highlighter still uncapped in her hand, the page turned to Maillard reaction. Temperature thresholds and aromatic compound formation pp. 3111-347. He had not woken her. He had taken the highlighter, capped it, and slid the book onto the coffee table. He had thought then that she was studying because she loved the science. He had not thought then that she was studying for a man she had not yet met. On a Friday night she could not yet see. The fire dropped. The sauce caught. Naomi whisked. Connor, watching her wrist, decided to try a different blade. Tell me, Naomi, he said in English, loud enough for table 6 to hear. Since you're putting on such a show, what's the exact temperature you need to maintain for the Maillard reaction, without crossing into burnt territory? In Celsius and Fahrenheit, please. I assume you know what Maillard is. She did not look up from the pan. The Maillard reaction begins at approximately 154 degrees Celsius or 310 Fahrenheit, Naomi said. Her voice was steady, conversational, almost bored. For this dish, I hold the surface at 174, 345 Fahrenheit, which is the highest I can take it before sucrose breaks down into bitter compounds past 180 degrees Celsius. The soju flambe is 2/3 ethanol. Ethanol boils off at 78 degrees Celsius, leaving the aromatic esters bound to the fat-soluble flavor compounds in the marbled short rib. The cognac I add at the finish acts as a solvent for those compounds, and the alcohol evaporation concentrates the umami notes from the bone reduction. The sauce thickens through protein coagulation in the bone stock, not through starch. If I hold the pan above 165 Fahrenheit at finish, the albumin curdles and the sauce splits. If I hold it below, the matrix never forms and you eat soup. She plated the short rib en croûte. She spooned sauce. She set the plate in front of him. Will there be anything else, sir? Brittany Holt, in the small voice of a woman who had just understood something larger than the table she was sitting at, said, "Oh my God." Connor's face went the color of his wine. He picked up his fork. He cut into the short rib. He put the first bite in his mouth, and somewhere behind his eyes a small important thing collapsed, because it was, objectively, the best piece of meat he had ever tasted, and he could not call it bad without becoming a man who lied about food, which would have been the only lie he had not yet told tonight. He chewed. He swallowed. He said, "Acceptable." Brittany did not look at him for the rest of the meal. At 9:38 p.m., Naomi brought the check folio. The bill was $14,083.50. Wine, $6 to $800, $890. 2 short rib en croûtes despite Brittany ordering scallop because Connor had announced halfway through that he wanted to try, 8 wanted to try hers. 18% service charge automatically added per Hanyang policy on parties of 2 or more. Connor would scratch it out with his pen, write "I tip on merit" and initial it. He paid with a black Amex. The card cleared. He took the silver pen and signed the merchant copy. Above the signature line on the blank space reserved for notes to the merchant, he wrote 6 sentences in Korean. He did not write them quickly. He took his time. He underlined 2 words. He drew a small dismissive line through Naomi's printed name at the bottom. Then he closed the folio, set it on the edge of the table, and said in English to no one in particular, "Tell whoever manages this place that they should reconsider their hiring standards." He stood. He helped Brittany, who did not want help, into her coat. They walked toward the foyer. Naomi opened the folio at the service terminal. She read line 1. She read line 2. By line 4, her hand had moved on its own to the edge of the granite counter, and she was pressing her palm against the stone for the same reason a sailor grips a rail in heavy weather. Because the floor was not, in this moment, available to her. She read line 6. She closed the folio. She did not cry. She had decided, at 14, that she would not give certain people the courtesy of her tears, and at 26 she still kept that promise to herself. Marcus appeared at her elbow. "I want to handle it," she said. "Henry can handle it. Mr. Park can handle it. You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," she said. "I want to." He looked at her for a full second. Then he looked through the dining room toward table 14 and back at her, and he gave her the same small nod he had given her in 14 months of shifts together, which meant go. She walked toward the swing door that led to the foyer. At the door, she stopped. She turned her head, just once, just enough, and looked across the dining room at Min Jun. He had been waiting for her to look. He gave her one nod. She gave him one back. He had written 6 sentences he believed no one in the world would ever translate. In the next 11 minutes, he was going to hear every one of them spoken back to him, in 2 languages, in front of the woman he had asked to marry him. The foyer of Hanyang was a long marble room with a coat check on the left, a bronze elevator on the right, and a Murano chandelier overhead that had been blown in Venice in 1962 and shipped in 17 pieces. Connor Whitfield stood beneath it, tapping his foot. The valet was bringing the Maybach. Brittany was at the gilded mirror reapplying her lipstick with the slow attention of a woman who was no longer doing it for him. The coat check girl, Emily, 19 YU sophomore, had handed Connor his brioni and was now standing very still behind his counter because she had learned in 7 months on this floor that when a guest's voice got that loud, the air in the foyer changed temperature. The dining room door clicked open. Connor turned, expecting Henri with an apology and a comp voucher. What he got was Naomi Carter, walking toward him at a normal pace, carrying the black leather folio in her right hand. She had not taken off her apron. He had time, in the 7 seconds it took her to cross the marble, to choose a tone. He chose the wrong one. "Oh, here we go," he said. "What, you want a bigger tip? You should be on your knees thanking me. I could have your manager fired by Monday. By Tuesday you'll be serving coffee in a Starbucks in Newark." Naomi stopped 3 feet in front of him. She opened the folio. She turned it toward him so he could see his own handwriting. Then she said in Korean, in a Seoul accent so clean it sounded like a knife being unsheathed, "I 메시지 잘 받았습니다, Mr. Whitfield. 한 글자도 빠짐없이." "I received your message, Mr. Whitfield. Every single character." The color left Connor's face in 2 stages. First the cheeks, then the lips. The dining room door, which had not fully closed, was now standing open about 4 inches, and the air on the foyer side had gone cold. Brittany looked up from the mirror. "What did she just say?" "She didn't say anything," Connor said. His mouth had gone dry. It's a memorized phrase. Naomi turned her head slightly toward Brittany. She switched to English. I would like to translate what your fiancé wrote on the receipt, Miss Holt. Would you like to hear it? Brittany said yes. Naomi read the 6 sentences. She read them slowly. She did not editorialize. She did not soften. When she got to the 3rd sentence, the one with the word for that thing used in place of the word for her, she paused, and she did not paraphrase it, and she did not have to, because Brittany's face had already begun to do the work of understanding by itself. When she finished, Naomi closed the folio. She looked at Connor. You called me it, Mr. Whitfield. Not she. 23 times tonight, I counted. There is a particular silence that comes into a marble room when a woman has just removed a man's last remaining piece of dignity in front of his fiancée. It is not loud. It is geometrical. It expands. Brittany walked over to Connor. She did not throw anything. She slid the 2 4-carat ring off her finger, took his hand, opened his palm, set the ring in it, closed his fingers around it. She did this gently, the way you would set a glass on a coaster. I'm calling an Uber, she said. Please don't follow me out. She walked to the far end of the foyer and stood near the elevator with her back to him. Connor turned on Naomi. He had spent 35 years learning how to fight back when cornered, and he reached for the only weapon left in the bag. Do you have any idea, he said, his voice rising, who I am? Do you have any idea what I can do to this restaurant? I will own this floor by Monday. I will have your manager looking for work by Mr. Whitfield. The voice was not loud. It came from the wine station alcove, 6 feet to Connor's left. Marcus Lynn stepped forward. He was holding a folded napkin in one hand and nothing in the other, and his expression was the expression of a man who had wanted for 58 minutes to say one specific sentence. Our standards for guests, Marcus said, are not determined by their bank balance. They are determined by Mr. Park. Connor said, who? The dining room door opened the rest of the way. Park Min-jun walked out of it. He was not in a hurry. He had finished his espresso. He had set down his napkin in the precise center of his bread plate. He had stood from table 14 at his own pace, and he had crossed the dining room at his own pace, and now he was crossing the foyer at the same pace, and Connor Whitfield, who had been studying photographs of this exact face for 6 months. Board meetings, gala fundraisers, the one-time profile, felt his knees do something he had never asked his knees to do before. Mr. Whitfield. Min-jun stopped 4 feet away. He waited 1.5 seconds, then he spoke. I have read your 17 emails. I will be reading them again tonight with new context. Mr. Park? Sir. There has been no misunderstanding. There has been a recording. The dining room of Hanyang has had ambient audio capture installed by my security team for 2 years. I have on file every sentence you spoke in Korean tonight, including the one about the second tranche closing on Tuesday. The silence that came down then was the second silence of the evening. It was the bigger one. The woman whose tip you set at 0, Min-jun said, is the woman whose name will be on my marriage license in October. Connor opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Min-jun took his phone from his inside pocket. The fingers of his left hand, the index finger with the thin sail scar near the second knuckle from a Calbee knife when he was 11, dialed one number. He spoke in Korean. 6 words, Mr. Cho, Whitfield Capital. Decline everything. He hung up. He turned to Naomi. Are you all right? She said in Korean. I still have 2 hours on my shift. He almost smiled. He did not. He took 1 step closer and kissed her very lightly, on the forehead, the way a man kisses a woman whose work is not yet finished, and turned to go back to table 14. Well, Connor's voice cracked behind him. My mother used to be a waitress. Min-jun stopped walking. Naomi looked at Connor. He was not in this second a hedge fund CEO. He was a man from Akron, Ohio, whose mother had served pancakes in a diner on Route 18, and who had just lost everything he had built to forget her. She had the right to destroy him with 1 sentence. She knew the sentence. She did not say it. What she said was, I hope she's well, Mr. Whitfield. She turned around. She walked back through the dining room door. Across the foyer, Judge Ethan Whitmore, who had stepped out to settle his coat, paused on his way past Min-jun. He did not say anything. He placed his right hand on Min-jun's shoulder for exactly 2 seconds. Then he walked on. Some messages do not need words. By the time Connor Whitfield's Maybach reached Park Avenue, 3 text messages had arrived on his phone. By the time it reached his Tribeca penthouse, he would understand that he had not been threatened. He had simply been removed. The first text message arrived at 10:02 p.m. It was from Mr. Cho, Daijin Group's senior partner for North American capital markets, and it was forwarded to the 17 people at 3 sovereign wealth funds and 2 pension boards whose money had been quietly considering a position in Whitfield Capital's Asian expansion vehicle. The message was 9 words long in Korean. Translated, it read, Daijin will not be participating. Recommend the same. By Monday morning at 9:14 a.m. Eastern, $412 million had been withdrawn from Whitfield Capital's largest LP, the Saudi Sovereign Fund, under a clause titled Reputational Risk Reassessment that had been added to the agreement 6 years ago by a junior associate no one had ever thanked. By Wednesday, 2 more LPs had requested redemption. By Friday, Whitfield Capital's prime broker had reduced its leverage line from $1.8 billion to $400 million, citing counterparty re-evaluation. The hostile takeover of Dagen's North American logistics arm was never mentioned in any press release. The proxies stopped accumulating Tuesday at 2 p.m. The story died in silence, which was the way Min Jun preferred to kill stories. On the 11th day, the board of Whitfield Capital met with O'Connor in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a building he had personally chosen because he liked the view. They voted 7-2 to ask for his resignation. The exit package was not disclosed. The press release used the phrase to pursue other opportunities, which is what press releases say when there are no other opportunities. 6 weeks later, the engagement to Brittany Holt was formally dissolved by the law firm of Patton and Crow. Brittany kept the ring. She sold it at Christie's for $61,200 and donated the entire sum to the Restaurant Workers Community Foundation, anonymously with a note that read, "In honor of the woman at table 7. 3 months later, Connor Whitfield took a junior position at a small Boston quant fund managed by a man who had been his analyst at Whitfield Capital 7 years earlier. He moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Brookline. The Wall Street Journal ran 3 lines about it on page B7. On the night he signed the Boston lease, Connor Whitfield called his mother for the first time in 3 years and 4 months. Her name was Cheryl. She did not recognize his voice at first. When she did, she sat down on the kitchen floor of her house in Akron, where the linoleum still had the small scorch mark from the Christmas she had let him help with the candles in 1998, and she cried into the phone for 11 seconds before she could speak. He cried too. He did not ask for anything. He told her he was sorry he had been gone. She told him she had kept his old room exactly the way he left it. He flew home the next weekend. It was not a redemption arc. He had hurt a woman in a marble room and lost a career he had built on the bones of men like his father. But he was, by the end of that summer, beginning to be a person again. That was the most that could be honestly said. The story of what had happened at Table 7 did not stay inside Hanyang. Sophia Reyes, who had been writing what was supposed to be a 2,400-word review of the new tasting menu, emailed her editor at 2:17 a.m. the morning after, asked to rewrite the entire piece, and turned in 4,100 words at noon. The article ran the following Sunday on the front of the food section under the headline "The Woman at Table 7 and the War She Never Raised Her Voice to Fight." It went viral within 48 hours. It was translated into 11 languages. A college class at Cornell, Naomi's old program, added it to the syllabus for the spring semester. Naomi was offered 3 television interviews. She declined all 3. She did, however, agree to one thing. Chef Lee Jin-ho, in a meeting that lasted 40 minutes and involved no shouting at all, which was a first, agreed to fund the writing and publication of a 180-page training manual on dignity and service across all 3 of his restaurants. Naomi was the author. The first chapter was titled On Being Called It. The advance was $14,000, which she put toward the Bedford-Stuyvesant Restaurant Fund, bringing the total to $75,400. She did not quit Hanyang. 6 months after the night of Connor Whitfield, Hanyang implemented a written policy, Section 4.7 of the staff handbook, that any guest verbally abusing a staff member in any language would be permanently barred from the property and all affiliated establishments. Marcus Lin was promoted to floor director. Naomi accepted the floor manager position on her own terms, 4 nights a week, so she could finish her culinary chemistry certification on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She wore the same low bun. She still bussed her own tables when the floor was short. Min Jun offered to buy her a building in the West Village. She kissed him and said, "Not yet. I'm not done learning." He nodded. He did not bring it up again. It was 11:43 p.m. on a Friday in late October, exactly 6 months, and 1 day after Connor Whitfield walked out of Hanyang. The dinner service had ended at 11:15. The dining room was empty except for the candle stubs being collected by the bus team. Naomi stood alone in the staff locker room on the 31st floor. She untied her apron. She folded it twice along the seam the way her mother had taught her to fold dish towels in Atlanta in 2002. On the inside of her locker, taped above the small mirror, was a photograph of her grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor Carter, born Macon, Georgia, 1932. Died the same county, 2018. In the photograph, her grandmother was wearing a pale blue apron and laughing at something just outside the frame. Naomi looked at her for a moment. She did not say anything. She did not have to. She put on her coat. She rode the elevator down 31 floors. Through the glass doors of the lobby, she could see Min Jun standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, looking up at the building. He had never once come up to the kitchen. He never would. Outside, the October air was 47 Fahrenheit, and the city smelled of roasted chestnuts and exhaust and something almost like rain. He took her hand. They walked east toward the river. He did not ask how her shift was. He never did. He would in the morning, over coffee, and she would tell him then. For now, they walked. How we treat the person bringing us our food is a mirror. Some people look into that mirror their entire lives and never see themselves. Some finally do. The rest of us decide who deserves to sit at our table. If you made it to the end of this story, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments the name of one person who ever brought you food, a server, a cook, a neighbor, a grandmother, who you remember by name. Not the food, the person. Write the name, that's all. One name. I'm going to read every single one. And before you scroll away, let me ask you something honestly. Have you ever sat at a table and watched someone be unkind to the person serving you and said nothing? Most of us have. I have. There is no shame in admitting it. There is only the next time and what we do differently. The woman at table 7 did not need to be a secret heiress for her dignity to matter. It already mattered. It mattered the moment she walked onto that floor. It mattered every shift before Connor Whitfield ever sat down. The only thing that happened in that marble foyer was that the world finally caught up to what was already true. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm to bring this kind of story to someone else who needs to hear it tonight. Share it with one person you know who has ever worn a uniform for tips. Subscribe and ring the bell, because next week's story is one I have been waiting 2 months to tell. Until then, be kind to the person bringing you your food. You never know who is sitting 8 feet behind them watching.